It's definitely worth a try if you've already tried, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, other antidepressants, and it's not worked for you. What's going on, guys? It's Jacob from Sunday Lifters. Welcome back to the channel, depending on whether you've been here before. Today we are going to be speaking all about a condition called anhedonia. Anhedonia is essentially the lack of feeling or feeling of pleasure towards things you once found great joy in, such as hobbies, such as good food, socializing. It could be sex, it could be almost anything really. And sort of because of that lack of feeling towards things, it's often bundled in with depression, and the way depression is treated usually is through the form of prescribed antidepressants. But sometimes this doesn't actually work in people who have anhedonia. It can actually blunt their emotions and sort of make their condition worse. So what I'm going to do today is propose a method that you can use without pharmacology, just a sort of practice you can put in place to hopefully control your dopamine and therefore beat anhedonia. We'll find out why dopamine is specifically linked as we go on. But before we get into this anymore, guys, if you could just drop this video a like, comment down below, or consider subscribing if you're not already. It does help the channel grow and it's hugely appreciated. So what is anhedonia? Like I say, it is just that lack of feeling somebody will have, or lack of feeling pleasure towards things. Anhedonia is called that because hedonia, an means anti, so it's like no pleasure. Scientists predict that somebody might develop anhedonia because of a change in their brain activity, specifically in relation to the neuromodulator dopamine, which we probably, or most people, know as the sort of feel-good hormone. In actual fact, dopamine is sort of responsible for so much more than the pleasure, and it's actually not the thing necessarily responsible for the pleasure you feel, but getting you to pursue that pleasure and move towards it. Dopamine is responsible for motivation, drive, your cravings. It's responsible for how we perceive time and even the way we move. This is why people with diseases such as Parkinson's, we notice there's actually a death of their dopamine neurons in the brain. And this is why, compared to somebody who hasn't experienced that cell death, they can't control their movement quite as well. Studies in rodents have shown that people who suffer from anhedonia might actually be experiencing a overactivation basically of the dopamine cells within their prefrontal cortex in the brain, and this somehow as a downstream effect changes how that person experiences pleasure and actually pursues pleasures as well. So how does anhedonia currently tend to be treated? It's usually, like I say, a doctor will prescribe antidepressants, and in some people this does work, but there's always people's circuitry is different, the way they respond to things is different, and in some people the antidepressants actually just numb their emotions further and make the anhedonia worse. There is also current research going on at the minute into the sort of popular party drug ketamine, and using that as a potential cure for anhedonia, because ketamine does also have some antidepressant properties. Now, outside of medication, you can try controlling and sort of resetting your dopamine in the brain essentially to a new baseline level in order to change biologically how much pleasure you can experience from different things in your life. Now, this isn't something I've come up with. I actually got this off Leo Longevity, and I will link his video down below because he explains this beautifully. But essentially what you can do is reset your dopamine to a new baseline by stripping back as many pleasurable things in your life as you can bear for a couple of months. You can actually sort of reset your dopamine and sort of make it more sensitive to pleasures that you have in life. So if you were to cut back on pleasurable foods, you only drank water for a couple of months, you avoided socializing outside of work, with the exception of people you may live with, who you have to speak with. If you have a partner, or you are a person who has regular sex, maybe with their consent, if the partner is happy with that, you go a couple of months without that, stripping back as many pleasurable things in your life as you can bear. After a couple of months of this, you'll be very highly sensitized to the small pleasures. If you're drinking water for a couple of months and then you have an orange juice for the first time, you're going to experience so much more pleasure from that orange juice than you would if you were having orange juice every day. To give more examples, if it's alcohol, if it's drugs, if it's cigarettes, if it's music, all of these things, if you strip them back, you're going to really sensitize yourself to all the sort of external stimuli you have in your life and that you've stopped yourself from having for a couple of months. The reason this would work is because when we experience a big release of dopamine from something we find pleasurable, or the movement towards that thing we find pleasurable, the gaining of the reward, we get a big spike in dopamine, and after that dopamine comes back down, it goes to slightly lower than it was before it went up to the peak in the first place. And when we expose ourselves to everything we find pleasurable, we thrive off hedonism, and don't do things that we don't like in life, our dopamine gets desensitized over time. And so what happens is we start to find less and less pleasure from the things we do. And so what normally happens is people do more and more of those things. This is exactly why people who get addicted to drugs have to keep doing more and more of that drug, because they get desensitized to it. Their dopamine dysregulates, it keeps getting lower and lower every time they get that hit. So they have to do more and more to get that same peak. So like I say, if you can remove all the sort of pleasurable things you can bear in your life for a couple of months, if you were experiencing anhedonia, it will be a tough few months, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to downplay the severity of this condition, and I don't think it's something you should take on alone. You should speak to medical professionals and tell them why you're doing it and see what they say. You need, at least one person as a support, bracket when you do this, basically a shoulder, somebody you can talk to and let them know what you're doing. But again, other than that, you might want to avoid any major sort of social interactions during this time. If you can fight through those couple of months and come out the other side, you will be sort of at a new baseline of dopamine. You will be able to find pleasure from a lot more things in your life, and therefore you will have beaten anhedonia without pharmaceutical drugs, which is a great thing. It's definitely worth a try if you've already tried selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, other antidepressants, and it's not worked for you and you are suffering from anhedonia. Try doing this, use your willpower. Hopefully you'll get through it, and when you come out the other side, you'll have a much better sort of experience in your life. Thank you very much for sticking about, guys. It's always very much appreciated. I hope you found this video useful. If you did and you haven't already, if you could just drop it a like, a comment, subscribe if you're not already, and hit that bell icon to stay up to date with other videos I'm doing. You can follow me on all my socials. It's at SundayLifters on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And you can email me at sundaylifters@gmail.com for workout plans, meal plans, coaching and partnerships. Take it easy, guys, and I'll see you back here again very soon.